Got to read it right, though.
But our first guest is one of the best known and most award-winning motivational speakers out there, hands down, period, worldwide. Mr. Jim Cathcart has coached hundreds of thousands of people to success.
You can find him at jimcathcart.com. You do want to write down that website, I promise. He's the author of 14 books, from the Acorn Principle to relationship selling. And Jim, you've been called, and I love this, someone once said that you're what Fonzie would have been if he'd gone into business. Now, what does that mean?
Should we go and do it? Hey, there you go, Jim.
There's a lot for leather jackets.
Yeah, I think they're...
What do you think about that title, though? What does that mean to you?
That's a little embarrassing, but it's kind of fun. That probably relates to the fact that I ride a motorcycle and I play rock and roll and you know, that sort of thing.
In fact, you were telling us just a moment ago, you wrote a song and he walked into Sun Records some years ago and played it for him.
Many years ago. Yeah, like a generation ago, I grew up in Little Rock. And so I drove from Little Rock to Memphis, and I went to Sun Records and had an appointment. And I went in and I played my song for them, and they said, good. What else you got? I said, that's pretty much it. He said, we don't need songs, we need songwriters. Oh, you know, so I went back home, but I was happy. I had my moment.
Switch gears here.
Well, and we're so glad you did, because you have helped so many people reach inside for the diamonds rather than peeling off the pennies. See, I'm a follower of yours.
Thank you.
Tell us what that's just one of the many subjects you've touched on.
Well, I talk about what I call the acorn principle. You know, if you start with an acorn, you will always get oak. Never get redwood, ever. Even if you send the acorn to redwood camp, it's going to come back a very insecure oak, right?
That's true, yeah.
So everyone has the seed within them of potential to be good at some things. And I think we ought to spend a lot of time figuring out what those things are, and then dedicate the rest of our life to doing those things that we're suited for, that we are gifted to be really good at. And that's a lifelong journey of self-awareness.
And Jim, you also talk about doing what's called intelligent motivation for a challenging world. Is there an intelligent motivation out there at the same time?
Well, intelligent motivation as opposed to the other kind.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And the other kind, most people think of motivation in a trivial way. They think of it as something superficial. You know, it's just mood or excitement.
Right.
But motivation, if you think of it as motive and action, a motive without action is useless. Action without a motive is just frenetic behavior. And you couple the two together, determine what matters, do what it takes, keep on doing it until the outcome is achieved. That's what intelligent motivation is about. It's about outcomes, not feelings.
And if you do those first three, you will achieve.
Exactly.
But I bet you come across this all the time, because you've spoken all over the world and you are such a powerful speaker. Award-winning, just exceptional at the podium. I bet when people leave the hall, they are all worked up and just ready to go, and then 3 days later, they're not doing it. Do you run into that a lot, and is that the biggest problem that people encounter?
Someone asked me one time, what's your favorite response from an audience? And my answer has always been the same. I want people to walk out of that meeting saying, I never thought about it like that. That makes perfect sense. I could do that. See, that's my goal. I'm not there to get them excited. I'm there to shift their thinking so that they start believing in themselves more, and they start realizing that success is not about being some great gifted prodigy. It's about dedication to a cause over an extended period of time, acquiring the skills you need, building a reputation that'll help, opening the doors, and living the life of the person you could be.
And Jim, also take us back maybe a few years, maybe something recently. Has there ever been a time in your life, though, on a more personal basis, that you have not been as motivated as you would like to be?
Oh,
have you always had this energy that we see right now?
Someone said to my wife, Paula, one time, they said, is he always like this? And she said, yeah, pretty much. You know, and they said, how depressing. Well,
in terms of having to live with the perfection?
I get discouraged, but I don't get depressed, because in order to get depressed, you've got to sustain the discouragement. You've got to feed it. You know, it's like fear. If you feel fear, that doesn't mean you should stop all action. That just means you feel fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of fear. And if there were no fear, you couldn't be courageous. So I teach people how to think about their life in a way that they're in control of their response to it. You know, maybe the world hands you a whole bunch of awful circumstances, But you determine whether you're going to turn that into something useful or just wallow in it and get depressed.
Well, and the temptation for folks out there may be to see you highly successful and say, well, he can do it. But you, at one time, had a job, I love this one, repossessing logging trucks?
Yeah, for GMAC. I was a field representative
You're lucky you didn't
in
get
the
killed,
Ozarks.
'cause
Well,
loggers
tell
are-
me.
Yeah. So you haven't had, my point is, you haven't always been this person. What was it, when was that moment that you started working on your own acorn?
There actually was a moment. You know, for a lot of people it's not that defined, but for me it was. I grew up in a house where Dad was a telephone repairman, Mom was a housewife, my invalid grandfather was there in the front room, and my grandmother taking care of him, and I never expected much. And then one day, years later, I was newly married, new baby at home, no money in the bank, no college degree, and I was working as a clerk at the Housing Authority in Little Rock, and I heard the radio, Earl Nightingale, a little 5-minute motivational program called Our Changing World. He said, if you'll spend an extra hour each day studying your chosen field, in 5 years or less, you'll be a national expert. And that was the moment. I said, I could do that. I'm a government clerk. I got 8 hours a day.
We can make this thing happen.
Exactly.
Our
Yeah, I
tax
can do
dollars
that.
at work improving Jim Cathcart.
And 5 years later, I was a full-time speaker and trainer teaching other people's courses, and a few years after that, teaching my own courses and doing my own research.
But in today's world also, though, Jim, and the many challenges, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, and one of the many things that you've talked about, how can we find that balance also, especially with the economy being the way that it is? It's easy to get depressed. It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy not to be motivated.
See, that's the thing, Alex. It's easy to be a loser.
Right.
It takes no effort. It takes no intellect. It takes nothing. Just go with the flow.
Right.
It's easy to go downstream. Hop in the river. It'll work. You know?
Yeah.
Zero skill requirement. What this requires is very little, but it's a very important little. You decide you're going to take charge of your life. You decide, okay, that's the situation, and that situation stinks, but I determine how I think about that and whether I'm proactive or reactive.
And how do you determine what you're good at? Because at that moment when you heard Earl Nightingale, how did you determine that what you wanted to do was what essentially he was doing? So that's where you were going to devote your hour.
You know, I really don't know on that early decision of mine.
Do you give people advice on how to find what they're good
Absolutely. I wrote a book called The Acorn Principle that's all about exploring the seed that's you and determining what is it that makes you you and how do you nurture that. So it's about spending a lot of time noticing more about yourself.
Wow.
Wow.
Jim, I think a lot of folks already feel motivated this morning, and you'll have a chance to as well tonight. The Prosperity Series, you definitely need to come out and check this out tonight.
Absolutely. It starts at 6:30. Get there early. The room will be full at the Memphis Botanic Garden. And this may be your hour that you devote. Start today.
Thank you.
Love meeting you.
Thank you, sir.
We'd love to have you back.
It's an honor. We are just getting you started on this Thursday morning right here on Live at 9. There is a tea celebration going on.
That's right. And this isn't just about tea. This is about big business, global business. We'll be back.